Nobody knew that when Elton John stepped onto the stage that night, he was carrying the weight of a secret that had haunted him for over 40 years. The lights of Madison Square Garden blazed against his sequin jacket. 20,000 fans screamed his name, and yet his eyes were searching for something in the crowd, someone he never expected to see again. When he finally found that face in the third row, his fingers froze above the piano keys. The roar of the audience faded into silence, and in that moment, everything he had built, everything he had become, threatened to crumble into dust. But let's go back to where this story truly begins. It was October 14th, 2018. The Farewell Yellow Brick Road Tour had already become the most talked about concert series of the decade. Elton John, at 71 years old, had announced that this would be his final tour, a 3-year journey across the globe to say goodbye to the stages that had made him a legend. Critics called it the end of an era, fans called it heartbreaking. But for Elton, it was something far more personal, something he couldn't explain to anyone, not even to his husband David, not even to his closest friends. The Madison Square Garden show was supposed to be just another stop on the tour, sold out in minutes, VIP packages going for thousands of dollars. The production crew had been setting up for 3 days. Everything was perfect. Everything was planned down to the second. But Elton knew something was wrong the moment he woke up that morning. He couldn't explain it. There was a heaviness in his chest, a strange electricity in the air, as if the universe was trying to warn him about something he couldn't yet see. He stood by the window of his hotel suite, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, and for the first time in decades he felt genuinely afraid. Not the usual pre-show nerves, something deeper, something that whispered of unfinished business. But the truly shocking part hadn't come yet. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Elton arrived at the arena for sound check. His team moved around him like a well-oiled machine. Stylists, managers, sound engineers, security personnel. They had done this thousands of times. They knew every step, every cue, every detail of how to prepare Elton John for a performance. But today, something was different. Today, Elton was quieter than usual. His jokes didn't land. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You okay, boss?" asked his tour manager, a man named Richard who had been with him for 15 years. Elton nodded, but he didn't speak. He walked to the piano at center stage and sat down. The arena was empty except for the crew. 20,000 seats stretched out before him like a sea of red velvet. In a few hours, every single one would be filled with a person who had paid money, taken time, traveled miles, all to see him, all to hear him play. The responsibility of that thought pressed down on his shoulders like a physical weight. He placed his fingers on the keys and began to play the opening notes of Your Song. The melody echoed through the empty arena, bouncing off the walls, filling the silence with ghosts of performances past. And as he played, his mind began to drift backward, through decades of memories, through triumphs and failures, through moments of pure joy and depths of unimaginable despair. He thought about the first time he had ever performed in front of an audience, a small pub in London, 1968, when he was still Reginald Dwight, a shy, overweight piano player with thick glasses and a dream too big for his circumstances. He thought about the moment Bernie Taupin handed him those first lyrics, words that would change both their lives forever. He thought about the sold-out stadiums, the #1 hits, the awards, the magazine covers, the moments when he truly believed he had everything a man could want. But mostly he thought about the people he had lost along the way. The friends taken too soon, the relationships destroyed by fame, the parts of himself he had sacrificed on the altar of success. Wait, don't miss this detail. There was one person in particular. Someone whose face Elton hadn't seen in 42 years. Someone whose memory he had buried so deep that he had almost convinced himself it had never happened. Almost. Because some memories refuse to stay buried. Some ghosts demand to be seen. Her name was Margaret. She wasn't famous. She wasn't part of the music industry. She was just a girl from a small town in northern England. A girl Elton had met during the chaotic summer of 1976, when he was at the peak of his fame and the bottom of his soul. The world saw a superstar living his best life. Margaret saw a broken young man desperately searching for something real in a world made entirely of plastic and pretense. They had met backstage after a concert in Manchester. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had snuck past security with a borrowed press pass, hoping to get an autograph for her younger brother who was dying of leukemia. Elton had been exhausted that night, drained by the performance, irritated by the endless stream of people wanting something from him. When Margaret approached, he was ready to wave her away like all the others. But then she spoke. "My brother doesn't have much time left," she said, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. "He listens to your music every day. He says it makes him feel like he's not alone. I just wanted to tell you that. I just wanted you to know that what you do matters." Elton looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time, and something in his chest cracked open. Something he had been protecting with walls of fame and excess and carefully constructed indifference. He spent the next 3 hours talking to Margaret. Not about music, not about fame, but about life, about fear, about the things we carry that no one else can see. She told him about her brother Tommy, about watching someone you love slowly fade away while doctors shake their heads and offer empty comfort. He told her about his father, about the man who had never shown him love, about the wound that no amount of success could ever heal. By the time the sun came up, something had changed between them. Something profound, something that felt almost sacred in its honesty. And you won't believe what happened next. Elton made Margaret a promise that night, a promise that would haunt him for the rest of his life, echoing in the quiet moments between concerts, in the darkness before sleep, in the mirror every morning when he looked at his own reflection. He told her he would visit her brother. He told her he would come to the hospital, sit by Tommy's bedside, play him a song on whatever piano they could find. He wrote down the address on a napkin. He held her hands and swore on everything he had that he would be there. But he never went. The tour moved on. The next city called. The next stage waited. There were planes to catch, interviews to give, records to promote, parties to attend. Day by day, Margaret's face faded from his immediate memory. The napkin with the address disappeared somewhere in the chaos of hotel rooms and tour buses. The promise became a ghost, hovering at the edge of his consciousness, but never quite solid enough to demand action. 3 weeks later, Margaret's brother died. He was 12 years old. He died believing that Elton John was coming to see him, that any day now, the man whose music had carried him through chemotherapy and bone marrow biopsies and endless nights of pain would walk through that hospital door and make everything better, even if just for a moment. Elton never knew. He never called. He never wrote. He simply forgot. And in forgetting, he committed what he would later consider the greatest sin of his life. Not the drugs, not the excess, not the wasted years. This broken promise to a dying child. But Margaret didn't forget. Margaret remembered everything. But wait, here's where things take an unexpected turn. Now, 42 years later, as Elton sat at the piano during soundcheck at Madison Square Garden, the memory of that broken promise came flooding back with a force that nearly knocked him off the bench. He didn't know why. He couldn't explain what triggered it. Perhaps it was the empty arena, so similar to that venue in Manchester. Perhaps it was something in the air, some cosmic alignment of guilt and fate. But suddenly, he could see Margaret's face as clearly as if she were standing right in front of him, young, hopeful, trusting. He stopped playing. His hands fell to his sides. The last notes faded into silence. "Elton?" Richard's voice echoed from somewhere behind him. "Elton, you all right?" He didn't answer. He couldn't answer, because in that moment, he realized something that sent ice through his veins, something that made his heart stutter and his breath catch in his throat. Tonight, in this arena, among 20,000 strangers, someone was going to remind him of what he had done. He didn't know how he knew. He couldn't explain the certainty, but he knew it the way you know when a storm is coming, in your bones, in your blood, in every fiber of your being. The hours before the concert passed in a blur of routine and rising dread. Elton retreated to his dressing room, surrounded by the familiar ritual of preparation. Makeup applied with expert hands, wardrobe selected with careful attention, vocal warm-ups echoing off the walls, the sequined Gucci jacket worth more than most people's cars, the glasses, always the glasses, a shield between himself and the world. His team moved around him with practiced efficiency, but he felt completely alone. He stared at himself in the mirror and tried to recognize the man looking back. 71 years old, 5 decades in the spotlight, over 300 million records sold. Knighted by the Queen, a husband, 2 sons, everything anyone could ever want, and yet there was still that emptiness, that hollow space in his chest where peace should have been. At 8:17 p.m., a knock came at the dressing room door. Richard entered, his brow furrowed with confusion, holding a piece of paper. "Someone left this at the box office," he said slowly. "They said it was urgent. They said you would want to see it before the show." Elton took the paper with steady hands. It was a simple note, handwritten in neat cursive that somehow looked familiar even after 4 decades. "You promised. I remember. 3rd row, center. M." The paper fell from Elton's fingers and drifted to the floor like an autumn leaf. His heart stopped. His vision blurred. The dressing room seemed to tilt and spin around him. It couldn't be. After all these years, it was impossible. "Elton, what does it say? Elton!" But Elton couldn't hear Richard's voice anymore. He could only hear the blood pounding in his ears, could only feel the weight of 4 decades of guilt crashing down on him like a wave finally reaching shore. She was here. Margaret was here. And she remembered everything. The next thing that happened would change everything. At 8:45 p.m., the lights in Madison Square Garden dimmed. The crowd erupted in a roar that shook the very foundations of the building. 20,000 voices rose in anticipation, a wall of sound that would have overwhelmed anyone who wasn't used to it. The band took their positions. The video screens flickered to life, displaying images from Elton's legendary career. And backstage, standing in the darkness just before the spotlight, Elton John tried to remember how to breathe. He had performed over 4,000 concerts in his lifetime. He had faced crowds larger than this. He had played through sickness, through heartbreak, through personal crises that would have destroyed lesser men. But tonight, his legs felt like they were made of lead. His hands trembled at his sides. His mouth was dry as desert sand. 30 seconds, Elton," said the stage manager. 30 seconds. 30 seconds until he would walk out there. 30 seconds until he would have to sit at that piano and pretend everything was fine. 30 seconds until he would have to look into the crowd and find her. He thought about running. For one wild moment, he actually thought about turning around and walking out the back door, getting in a car, disappearing into the night. He could cancel. He could claim illness. He could... 10 seconds. Too late. It was too late for escape. It was too late for everything. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Elton John." The crowd exploded, and somehow, impossibly, Elton's legs began to move. He walked onto the stage like a man walking to his own judgment. The lights hit him, blinding, burning. The noise was overwhelming, a tsunami of love and expectation that threatened to swallow him whole. He raised his hand in greeting, the practiced gesture of a lifetime performer, and the crowd's roar somehow grew even louder. He reached the piano. He sat down on the bench. He looked out at the sea of faces, 20,000 people who had come to see a legend, not knowing they were about to witness something far more raw and real than any performance. And then he saw her. 3rd row, center, just where the note said she would be. She was older now, of course, 70-something, with white hair and weathered skin that spoke of years and hardship and the kind of grief that never fully heals. But her eyes, those eyes, were exactly the same. The same eyes that had looked at him with hope that night in Manchester. The same eyes that had trusted him to keep his promise. She was looking directly at him, and on her face was an expression Elton couldn't read. Not anger, not accusation, something else, something he couldn't name. Pause, because here comes the moment no one expected. His fingers found the keys. The opening notes of Benny and the Jets filled the arena. The crowd sang along, 20,000 voices joining in perfect unison. But Elton wasn't really there. His body played the music, muscle memory built over decades, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He was back in 1976. He was 29 years old. He was sitting in a hospital parking lot in Manchester, knowing he should go inside, knowing a dying boy was waiting for him, but unable to make himself open the car door. He remembered the excuses he had made, the justifications, the way he had told himself there would be time later, that the boy would understand, that one broken promise couldn't possibly matter in the grand scheme of things. But there wasn't time later. There never is. And one broken promise, he had learned, could echo through decades. The first hour of the concert passed in a haze. Elton played hit after hit: Crocodile Rock, Rocket Man, Tiny Dancer, and the crowd loved every second. They didn't notice that his voice cracked during the quiet parts. They didn't see the way his eyes kept returning to the third row, to the woman who sat perfectly still while everyone around her danced. They were lost in nostalgia, in the joy of witnessing a living legend, in the bittersweet knowledge that this was goodbye. But Margaret noticed. Margaret saw everything, and then came your song. It was the moment Elton had been dreading since he first saw that note. The song that had started it all. The song he had been playing that night in Manchester when Margaret found him backstage. The song that, he would later learn, had been playing in Tommy's hospital room when the 12-year-old boy took his last breath. Elton began to play, and his voice emerged soft and vulnerable. It's a little bit funny, this feeling inside. The crowd fell silent in that way only a truly moved audience can. 20,000 people held their breath, united in reverence for a song that had touched so many lives. And in the third row, Margaret's eyes filled with tears that she made no effort to hide. Elton couldn't do this. He couldn't sit here and sing this song like nothing had happened. He couldn't pretend anymore. The mask he had worn for 40 years was cracking, splitting, falling away. He reached the chorus and his voice broke, and then something happened that no one in that arena would ever forget. Elton stopped playing. His fingers lifted from the keys. The music died in mid-phrase. The silence that followed was so profound, so complete, that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning units high above the stage. 20,000 people stared in confusion. The band exchanged worried glances. Richard's voice crackled urgently in Elton's earpiece. "Elton? Elton, what's happening? Are you okay?" But Elton didn't answer. He was looking at Margaret, and for the first time in 42 years, he was done pretending. "I need to say something," he said into the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper. The arena remained silent. No one dared to breathe. "There's a woman in the audience tonight. She's sitting in the third row, and I owe her an apology that's 40 years overdue. You won't believe what happened next." The spotlight operator, confused but professional, found Margaret in the crowd and illuminated her with a soft glow. She sat frozen, her face pale, her hands gripping the armrests of her seat. Elton stood up from the piano. This was unprecedented. In 50 years of performing, he had never done anything like this. The audience didn't know whether to cheer or remain silent, so they did neither, trapped in the strange limbo of witnessing something completely unexpected. "In 1976, Elton continued, his voice growing stronger, "I met a young woman after a concert. Her brother was dying. She asked me to visit him in the hospital. I promised I would." He paused. The weight of the confession pressed down on him, but also somehow began to lift. "I didn't go. I broke my promise, and that boy died without ever meeting the person his sister had promised was coming." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People turned to look at Margaret. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. But Margaret didn't move. She just kept looking at Elton with those same eyes, those eyes that had trusted him once. "I've thought about you almost every day since then," Elton said, and now his voice cracked, and he didn't try to hide it. "I've carried that guilt like a stone in my chest for 42 years. He stepped away from the piano. He walked to the edge of the stage. He was only meters from Margaret now. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. And if I could go back, I would give up everything, all of this, just to have kept that promise." The arena was weeping. 20,000 strangers united in this moment of raw human truth. And then Margaret did something no one expected. She stood up. The crowd fell silent again. All eyes were on this white-haired woman in a simple blue dress, standing in the third row of Madison Square Garden. "I didn't come here for an apology," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. Elton's heart stopped. This was it. She was going to reject him, but Margaret wasn't finished. "I came here because before my brother died, he made me promise something too." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age, worn at the edges but carefully preserved for 4 decades. "He made me promise that one day I would give you this." A gasp rippled through the crowd. "He knew you weren't coming," Margaret said. "He knew before I did, but he wasn't angry. He said carrying around that much weight must be exhausting. He said you probably needed forgiveness more than he needed a visit. Security passed the envelope to the stage. Elton received it with trembling fingers. What was in that letter would change Elton's life forever. On the front, in a child's shaky handwriting, to Elton John, from Tommy, age 12. Should I read it? He asked Margaret, his voice barely audible. She nodded. He opened it. A single sheet of paper, yellowed but intact, covered in careful pencil writing. As his eyes moved across the page, great heaving sobs shook his entire body. When he finally looked up, his face was transformed. The weight was gone. In its place was something that looked like peace. "Tommy forgave me," he whispered. "He forgave me before I even knew I needed forgiving." This is where the story takes its final, unexpected turn. Elton returned to the piano. "I'd like to play something I've never performed before," he announced. "Something I wrote many years ago for someone I failed, someone named Tommy." He began a melody no one had ever heard. Beautiful, haunting, capturing regret and redemption. The song was called "The Promise I Couldn't Keep." Written in 1977 in a Paris hotel room, drunk and alone. Never recorded, never shared. His secret confession. The video. Screens showed Tommy's photograph, a smiling 12-year-old with bright eyes, giving a thumbs up to the camera. When the final note faded, the arena exploded in the most thunderous ovation Madison Square Garden had ever witnessed. During the intermission, Margaret was brought backstage. They embraced, a long, silent hug between two people connected by tragedy. "Tommy was right about you," Margaret whispered. "How so?" "He said anyone who could write songs like that had a beautiful soul." Before leaving, she handed him one more item, a battered cassette tape. "Tommy recorded this a week before he died. He was trying to learn your song for his nurse." Elton listened at 3 a.m. in his hotel room. Scratchy recording, clumsy playing, unmistakable love. And at the end, Tommy's voice. "I messed up again, but I'll keep trying." That's what Elton would do. In that silence, Elton finally understood. Forgiveness wasn't about deserving it. It was about accepting the grace others offer. Tommy understood at 12. Elton needed 71 years. The tour continued 3 more years. Every night, Elton touched his pocket where Tommy's letter rested and whispered, "This one's for you, Tommy." His final concert was November 20th, 2022 in Stockholm. In his dressing room, a red rose waited with a note. "Thank you for keeping the last promise. Tommy would be proud. M." The reporters wrote about the spectacle. The legend grew, but they never knew about the letter against his heart, the cassette in his Windsor safe, the annual calls on Tommy's birthday. The world saw a legend's final bow. They saw the end of an era, but they didn't see the truth. Some secrets are too sacred to share. Some promises, once kept, become invisible, threaded into life, felt but never spoken. That night, looking at Stockholm's lights, Elton understood it had all been worth it. Every broken promise and second chance had led here. He touched Tommy's letter one last time. "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Somewhere, a 12-year-old boy who never lost faith was finally at peace. The story of Elton John and the face in the crowd became music history's most celebrated moment. But the full truth, the private tears, the forgiveness between two souls who waited decades, belonged only to them. But only Elton knew what really happened that night.